Have you ever wondered what it's like to complete one of the most difficult fitness events you can do with no prior experience? Well, back in 2020, I decided to enter into a full distance Ironman triathlon with no prior experience. I'd never done any type of triathlon training before. And I decided to do this because I'd been going and training in the gym for about 7 or 8 years at the time, and I felt a little bit lost. I didn't have a goal to aim for, and I did not know what to do moving forward. So I decided to enter into an Ironman triathlon. Although, the last thing I wanted to do was enter in, pay the money, and do a year of training and not actually complete it. The last thing I wanted to do was embarrass myself in front of my friends and my family with showing up on the day but not actually being able to complete it. And during the video, while I tell you the story, you will see how I got within an inch of backing out because it really was absolutely brutal. For most people, I would not recommend entering into a full distance Ironman triathlon without any prior experience. So for those of you who do not know, a full distance Ironman is a 2.4 mile swim, a 112 mile cycle, and a full distance marathon 26.2 mile run. And obviously, yes, they are all done consecutively, so from the swim, straight into the bike, straight into the run. I'm going to tell you the story of how this was one of, if not the most difficult days of my entire life, not only just because of how hard the actual disciplines were in terms of the swim, bike and run, but also other factors as well, which I'll go into in detail, which I don't think have been as bad since. So let's rewind the clock a little bit to the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. At the time, I was 22 years old. I'd been training for around 7 or 8 years in the gym, purely doing more hypertrophy strength style training in the gym, maybe training 5 to 6 days per week with the sole focus of gaining muscle and gaining strength. Although, after about 7 or 8 years, although I loved training in the gym, I was doing no cardio, my fitness wasn't great, and I got to the point where I wasn't really too sure where I wanted to go. I was starting to feel a little bit unmotivated, and I knew I didn't want to compete in any type of bodybuilding shows or anything like that. I was training just for general health, which is great, but maybe you're someone who's currently in the same position as me, where they felt like they wanted to shoot for something, they wanted to have a goal, they wanted to have something which they were working towards, as opposed to just training in the gym 5 to 6 days a week with a slightly arbitrary goal of gaining a little bit more muscle. So one day I went into the gym, and I'm a personal trainer for those of you who don't know, as I have been since 2015, working with thousands of clients. I went into the gym, and one of my mates, who's also a PT who runs the gym, he said, "I'd love to complete an Ironman triathlon by the time I'm 40. At the time, he would have been mid-30s, 35, 36. As I said, I was around 22. And at the time, I didn't even know what an Ironman triathlon was. I think I'd heard of it, but I didn't know what it was. I was completely naive to what a triathlon, and especially Ironman, was. And I didn't know how long the distance actually was either. And we got talking a little bit more, and I said, yeah, that sounds cool. It sounds like a good goal for you to aim for. And he said, well, I'd love to do this with someone. Would you be up for it? And quite naively, I said, yeah, I'd like to do it in the next few years. And again, I had no sort of thought process of what it actually entailed or what it would actually mean for me to complete an Ironman triathlon without ever doing any type of triathlon training. So anyway, a few days went by. I looked into it a little bit more online, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to do it. Why don't we enter it next year? So at the time, as I said, it was around winter, December, January time, 2019 into 2020. And we decided, let's do it for 2021 because the Ironman triathlon in the UK is in July. Obviously, we weren't going to do it in 2020 because it was only 6 months down the line. Plus, as you can remember, even if we tried to do it in 2020, we wouldn't have been able to because of the dreaded CBOR. So I did what most people do online whenever they go into a new discipline. They type in the best training plan, the best thing to do, the best structure to follow to actually start improving in those disciplines. So for a triathlon, a swim, bike and run, I thought, why don't I just swim a few times, I'll run a few times, and I'll get a standard bike, and I should be able to build my fitness levels up pretty well. So over the next few weeks and months, I decided to implement more cycling, more swimming, and more running into my routine. What I found was that I was terrible at most of them, especially swimming. I remember my first swim session back in 2020, and it was terrible. I thought I could swim, and what I found was that I could swim to save my life, but I could barely complete one length of the pool. I was finishing 25 meters, which is one length of the pool, and feeling absolutely knackered. As I said, with a full distance Ironman, it's 2.4 miles in open water, so it's in a lake. So that's equivalent to what, 140, 150, somewhere 160 lengths of a 25 meter pool. I've just done quick maths there, I don't know exactly how many lengths it is. And I could barely complete one without gasping for air, and it made me feel a little bit embarrassed for one, and it humbled me a little bit. I realised that I had to do a lot of hard training if I wanted to be able to compete and finish the Ironman triathlon. The last thing I wanted to do was embarrass myself, embarrass my friends, embarrass my family who were going to come watch me on the day. That is not what I wanted to do. As the months went by, I did start to improve a little bit, but then COVID happened. We all know what happened there. I couldn't swim anymore. I couldn't go to the gym. I had to just run, and it was before I actually had a bike as well. So I was pretty much just running for a good 6 to 8 months. And then fast forward all the way to the end of the year, the end of 2020, we found out the 2020 race had obviously been cancelled because of that, and we found out that the 2021 race was still going ahead. So I finally got myself a bike, which meant I was able to cycle, I was able to run still, but the swimming pools were still not open. And as I said, I was a poor swimmer. By this point, I could maybe complete 6 lengths in the pool before I was gasping for air. And I was thinking to myself, I need to get in the pool soon to practice. Otherwise, there's absolutely no way I'm even going to make it to the cycle. Because the swim's first, and it starts off in the lake. If I can't complete the swim and I have to back out, then there's no point in even training for the cycle and the run, because I won't even get to it because I'll have to pull out, which would be extremely embarrassing. And as I mentioned before, the reason I was doing this was because I wanted a goal to aim for. I wanted something to strive towards and actually train for something for the first time since my footballing days when I was a teenager. But the last thing I wanted to do was embarrass myself. I wanted to complete this Ironman triathlon, not only for myself, but for other people and my family and friends who were watching as well. So as the months went by, I documented on this YouTube channel, actually, you can still go back and watch the old videos of me training in those lockdown days, during the COVID days, and I was ticking the boxes, I was running, I was cycling, but I was still not swimming, and that was starting to dig away a little bit in the back of my mind. I thought that yes, I'll be able to complete the run and cycle, but what's the point if I'm still not in the pools? As you can remember, the pools were still closed at the beginning of 2021 because of the restrictions and the lockdowns. As the weeks and months started to tick over, it really was starting to bug me a little bit that we weren't allowed in the pools. Finally, I think it was at the beginning of April, or end of March, beginning of April in 2021, the restrictions lifted a little bit. Our race was scheduled for the 4th of July in 2021. This meant I had, 3.5 months, give or take, to learn how to swim. 3.5 months to go from learning how to do 6 lengths, max, 150, 160 lengths equivalent to. As I said, it was an open water swim as well, so I had to learn not only to swim, but to get used to swimming in open water where you can't just touch the wall if you're getting tired. So that was one of the biggest obstacles I faced, learning how to swim. The next obstacle was learning how to actually fuel myself on the day, learning all the intricacies with the transition, learning how to actually efficiently cycle and pace myself during that. You've got to remember, it's 112 miles. That's a distance from where I live now, Newcastle, all the way to Edinburgh. And then you've got to get off and complete a full distance marathon. So as the weeks and months went by, I started to gain more confidence with my cycling and running. I started to gain more confidence with being able to complete it on the day. In the back of my mind, I always had that swim. I always thought that if I can't get to the point where I'm confident within my swim, I am going to completely sabotage my whole day because I'll have to back out in the first discipline, in the first event, which is the swimming. And that would be a complete catastrophe. I would have trained for over a year to only do about half an hour of the race and not even do the cycle or the run. So I knew I really needed to book my IDs up and learn how to swim efficiently. As the weeks and months went by, as we got closer to June and end of June, I started to build up my swim a little bit more. I started to gain a little bit more confidence. We did a few open water swims, which are horrific when you first start doing them, although again, it does start to get a little bit better. And then fast forward to the night before. So me and my mate ended up staying in an Airbnb close to where the swim start was, down in Bolton in the UK. And from what I remember, it was actually the Euros, the football, which was on at the time. And I remember it was an England game on the Saturday, the race was on the Sunday, and we were playing Ukraine. And I'm a big football fan, I wanted to watch that football game. So I watched the first half, I think the kickoff was 8 o'clock, got to 8:45, and then we went up to bed. As you know, if you live in England, it's still light at that time in the middle of summer. So it's not actually ideal sleeping somewhere else which you're not used to in a different location, and it's still light, and there's an England football game going on. And we knew we needed to get up at around 3, half 3 in the morning so that we could get up, sort all our stuff, make sure we've had our coffee, had our breakfast, and got down to the race start at 6 a.m. Luckily, I managed to get a decent night's sleep in. I probably slept for around 4.5 to 5 hours, which is crazy to think you're going to complete the hardest thing you're ever going to do in your life on a minimal amount of sleep. Not ideal, but it is what it is. So anyway, as the day came around, finally I woke up. I felt good, I felt fresh, but I still had that lingering thought in my mind of the swim. I knew that if I just got through the swim, I should be okay. But also, which I haven't mentioned yet, I had some problems with my bike a few weeks before as well. I had some problems with my seat. So long story short, my seat was broken a little bit, so the seat was constantly in the training rides a few weeks before, starting to go down as I was on my cycle. So it wasn't fully tightened onto the bike. Every 10-15 minutes it would sort of notch down a centimetre. And there was one ride about a week before the Ironman where I started my ride with the seat at the height of where it should be. And then by the end it was all the way at the bottom. And as you can imagine, this is not ideal. Puts a lot of pressure on the knees, puts a lot of pressure on the hips as well. And obviously I did not want that in my race. So I had two things in the back of my mind, apart from feeling semi-confident on the morning, which was the swim, getting through that, and actually not having any problems with my bike on the way around. I knew if my seat went all the way down, I'd have to obviously get off and fix it, or if I got a puncture or something else, that would delay my time. So with the bike, you're almost completely at the mercy of that, and you've got to just hope that it's okay on the day. So on the morning, once we woke up, we had coffee, we had breakfast, and from what I remember, we shoveled down about 1,000 calories, if not more, at about 4 a.m. As you can imagine, it's not ideal in terms of you're not very hungry at that time, you've just woken up. All of the adrenaline definitely gets through. You're a little bit nervous, but you're just ready to get it done by this point. And then we made our way down to the start area where everyone's racking their bike, everyone's getting sorted. And this is at around 4:30 a.m. for the start of 6 a.m. The last thing you want to do is get down there and it just be a complete carnage and a rush. And from what I remember, we got down about 4:30. It was light, it was blue skies. Everyone was relaxed. Everyone, around me was relaxed because we were early, we were on time, and nothing had gone wrong yet. So we made a leisurely walk down to the start area where we could rack our bikes. We thought, we've got a lot of time. It was 5 a.m. by this point, double checked over our bikes, and we said, let's try and go to the toilet, because the last thing you want to do is start an Ironman with a bad belly. So we managed to do that, and then by that point, it's just a waiting game. The butterflies start a little bit more when you're within 45 minutes of the start. You know this is what you've been training for over a year. This is what you've visualized in every run, in every cycle, and every swim. The last thing you want to do is have something go wrong now and have to pull out. But from what I remember, people were just ready to get on with it because it was nice weather, it was blue skies, you could hear the birds. Everyone was starting to feel that energy, which was great. And then as it got closer, it got to around 5:45. This is the point where you've got your wetsuit on, you start getting everything ready in terms of your goggles, your hat, and you start getting into the actual start line. And then as the minutes start counting down, the butterflies start a little bit more. And you're just thinking, hopefully everything goes well. No mechanical issues on the bike. Hopefully you don't have any bad situations with your stomach. Hopefully your fueling goes well. Hopefully the weather stays nice, which I'll get to in a few minutes' time. I want to be able to get through this race without it being an absolute slog. So finally by 6 a.m, the buzzer goes off and everyone gets in the water. I'm actually now going to jump into a post-race review from what I did after the Ironman 3 years ago. So just to confirm, this next few clips you're going to see are from 3 years ago, which was a week after I actually completed it. So obviously it was a lot fresher in my mind. So we ended up getting in the water, I think it was around 6:10. The pros go first, and then everyone was almost shuffling forwards. And I think then once you got to the front, they let you in groups of, I think, like 3 or 4, slid down the little pontoon, got in the water, and then away we went. So we're finally in 8-9 minutes into the race. Swim was, as I said, one of my weakest disciplines, the one which I was worrying about the most going into this, because I didn't really have much of a swim background whatsoever. And I already learned how to swim properly within the last month or two. We were getting a lot more open water swims in the last 4 weeks. So obviously I built up my confidence, but I still didn't really know how it was going to go on race day. The swim went pretty good, if I'm totally honest, if I do say so myself. So I stuck to the plan. I got in, made sure that I got myself on the right hand side of everyone, like I said, because I breathed on my left, so I could always see everyone. So if you don't know, if you do much open water swimming, or even swimming in the swimming pool for that matter, what I always say is it takes me about 10 minutes to settle in. The first 5 to 10 minutes of swimming is always horrendous. You know, you're going from being on your feet, breathing normally, just vertically, to suddenly plonking yourself in water where you're horizontal, trying to breathe with your head underwater. I don't know what it is, what it's like for other people, but for me, it takes me a while just to settle into my breathing. And that's one thing I was worried about. How long would it take for me to settle into my breathing so I didn't almost mildly panic when I was in there? But if I'm totally honest, I settled pretty much like that. As soon as I got in the water, I don't know whether it was the adrenaline or the water wasn't cold. I think it said it was 20 degrees in there. But I seemed to settle straight away, which is great, obviously. So when we got in the water, we did 1 loop, so 1.2 miles. Felt really good. I don't actually have, on my Garmin watch, it's a 2:45, so I can't set the time to an open water swim, my workout, sorry. So I essentially just set it to a standard cardio workout, just so after 1 lap, I could see what time I was on, so I could gauge to how well it was going. And I knew after 1 lap, it was going to be somewhere between 40 to 45 minutes. And when I got out on my first lap, I came out on, my watch said 40 minutes. On the Australian style exit. So we got out, watch said 40 minutes. I was like, perfect, everything's going smoothly, feeling good, and I'm actually bang on time, if not even better. Got back in the water and yeah, did the same thing again. Didn't really feel tired at all. Managed to, a lot of people struggle to go for a wee in the water, but I'm not really one of those people. I can go while I'm swimming as well. So I must have gone for about 5 pisses, if I'm totally honest, during that swim. And I think that actually helps me relax, because for me to do it, I have to relax. So it's almost like a blessing in disguise that I can do that. So yeah, second lap, I think everything on the swim went pretty much bang on. It was probably a 9 out of 10 performance for me, relatively speaking, on the swim. The only thing was, it's that I probably did swim a little bit too wide, because the swim is 2.4 miles, 3.8k, but I can almost guarantee that I did at least 4k, if not even 4.1, because of me swimming so wide, I was almost quite far away from the pack of people who were on the inside, so I was almost adding an extra little bit every time we sort of went round up towards the top buoy. So that was the only thing. I probably ended up doing more than I needed to, and I think I came out with an official time of, like, my watch said 1:24, but on the official Ironman, it said I did 1:27, which I'm absolutely fine with. But I mean, if I didn't swim so wide, I probably would have finished more towards that 1:20. But whatever, 1:25, whatever it was, I'm absolutely happy with that. I was absolutely fine. So got out the swim, felt great. You know, didn't really feel out of breath, like I've exerted much energy whatsoever. Got to T1. Again, this is the first triathlon I've done, so I didn't really know what to expect. I wanted to make sure that I took my time. Went at T1, got my bag, got everything changed. You know, you've got to take your wetsuit off, and if T1, it feels like there's so many things to remember within your bag, because obviously you take your wetsuit off, you've got your tri-suit on, got to make sure you've got helmet, sun cream, cleats, your cycling shoes, your socks, and everything, and get everything back in your bag. And what I'd done, I'd handed my T1 bag. So once you've changed, you hand it to the stewards, the people who are marshalling it. And then I ran to my bike, and then I noticed I hadn't put my cycling shorts on over the top of my tri-suit. So within training, every time I'd done a long cycle, I'd hand my tri-suit on and put my cycling short on top of that for extra padding. So I got to my bike and I was like, I had to almost make a split-second decision with, do I just let it go and save that extra, like, fannying about of 2 minutes of running back, get my bag, putting it back on, or just go. But I thought, you know what, I've got potentially over 7 hours here of being on the bike. I do not want to regret this decision. So I ran back to the T1 area, and then asked for my bag back, got my bag back, put my cycling shorts on over the top of my tri-suit, gave my bike back, and then went back to my bike. So that probably added an extra 2 to 3 minutes, but in the grand scheme of things, what does that matter? So, bike, swim done, on the bike, and if I'm totally honest, the first hour and a half to, about even 2 hours of the bike. So you start off Pennington Flash, just outside of Leigh, then you cycle all the way up into Bolton, and then when you get to Bolton, I think, looking at the map, you do about 5 to 10 miles up part of the loop route, and then you turn around at the top, come back on yourself, and then you do 3 big, I think it was 31-mile loops. So the first, hour and a half is spent just getting to Bolton from Pennington Flash, and then adding on that extra 10 mile just to make up the 112. So that first hour and a half is absolutely fine. You're almost just settling into the cycle. So that was fine. And then, got on to the actual loops and then did that full loop, 30 miles. So what's that? We're on about 50 mile in by this point. This is maybe about 2.5 hours in. So we're about a third of the way, quarter to a third of the way. And that's when it was when, it was literally just as I'd finished the first loop when I was coming back into Bolton. So anyone who, did the Ironman last Sunday would know, you're going to know what I'm going to say and what changed with the weather. So I got back into Bolton. That was when the torrential rain started. And I've ridden in rain over the last year, but this was something else. And I'm not just saying this, I'm not exaggerating. Well, maybe I am a little bit, but it was horrific. Right? The rain was lethal. It wasn't just that wet, trickling down rain. It was that absolute torpedo rain. It was the rain which, if you didn't have your helmet on, it's going to hurt. So that started after the first lap, like I said, what's that, about 40 mile in or whatever it was. And it was one of those where it was a mild day, 18, 19 degrees, but because it rained so heavily for a good 2 hours, it pretty much was that heavy for the full way around of my second lap. And that lap was, I'm not going to lie, that was probably one of the hardest bit of cycling I've had to endure through any of my training. Purely just because the rain was so heavy. And I just had my tri-suit while I'm in cycle shorts. And because I got wet, obviously, I just got really cold. And because I got cold, obviously, I started shivering. And this is how bad it was. I actually couldn't wait for the steep climbs to come. Because when the steep climbs were coming, my heart rate would rise and it would almost keep me somewhat warm. But then as soon as we're going downhill, and on the flat when the breeze is created and when you're wet, it was just absolutely killing me. And I've shivered on the bike. I've been cold on the bike over the winter, but never been that cold. And I'm not using it as an excuse, but it definitely played an effect on my energy levels and just how I felt overall. Because for one, I couldn't feel my hands and I couldn't feel my feet. So I had obviously my cycle shoes on. I didn't have any overshoes on and to keep my feet warm, and I had some just standard Nike socks on, not even proper cycling socks. So they were absolutely soaking. Couldn't feel my feet, couldn't feel my hands throughout that second lap. To be honest, even the remaining of the cycle. But that second lap in particular, when the rain was at its heaviest, was brutal, if I'm totally honest. There was points where I was thinking, at least 3 times I was thinking, I don't know how I'm going to complete this. Because I remember looking down on my cycle computer and it said, 50, 60 miles? And I was like, I'm only halfway and I'm shivering like a shitting dog. I'm absolutely freezing and I'm cramping up. Because it was so cold and the rain was that heavy, I had to concentrate so much on the road and the descents and just trying not to almost shiver to death. That I was not forgetting about my nutrition, but I was definitely not drinking and not eating as much. So I remember when I got onto my third loop, so I was on the last 30 miles, the rain, it was still raining, but it wasn't as torrential as it was before. I was so cold and shivering that I remember stopping at one of the aid stations and I was thinking, what can I do to warm up? And the only thing I could think of was take my socks off. And because my feet were so wet, they were like puddles in my cycling shoes. So I stopped at the aid station, took obviously my cycling shoes off. Well, I'm saying I didn't even do it. There was an ambulance there, and one of the nurses who was just handing out the food and the drinks, I got her to do it because I couldn't feel my hands. So she took my cycling shoes off, took my socks off, helped me get my shoes back on. And then I remember her saying, could you help me put my drinks bottles back in my cages because I couldn't physically grip onto it. And then she was saying, right, I want you to grip your brakes and then prove that you can brake. Because obviously she was starting to be a little bit concerned that I couldn't feel my feet and hands. And my right hand was working, but my left hand was definitely compromised. And when I was trying to prove that I could somewhat feel my hands, I was pulling the brakes and my right one was pulling. But my left one, I'd almost just lost any type of feeling in my fingers because obviously they were that wet and cold. And she was just like, are you sure you can carry on? And I was like, obviously I really want to carry on. But if I'm totally honest, I had one side of my brain saying, there's no way you can quit. But then the other side of my brain was just like, you are absolutely freezing. You've still got, 30 to 40 miles left. You're not going to be able to do it. Anyway, long story short, I ended up getting back on the bike, carrying on. Again, it helped a little bit taking the socks off. So, I didn't have puddles for feet. And I ended up finishing the bike. But the last half of that bike, that last 60 miles, just took it out with me so much. My energy levels, I think, were so compromised from shivering so much. My body temperature, just trying to keep to a certain level, took so much out of me. I still managed to bang in a load of fuel, because I noticed, like I said, I did start to cramp my quads and my hamstrings as well. So that's when I noticed I'm in deep shit here. I was shivering and I was cramping, which is not good. So the last half a lap, the last 20 miles, I made sure I banged in a load of food, and I just tried to keep warm as best as possible by almost ditching the game plan of holding back, trying to push harder, purely just to keep warm, as I said. So anyway, I ended up finishing the bike at around, I think it was like 7 hours, 7:35 or something. I can't even remember what it was, but if it wasn't for the rain, it sounds like an excuse. I would have liked to have thought that I'd finish it in around 7 hours, maybe just over 7:05, 7:10, or somewhere in that 7 hour mark. But because of everything that went on, ended up adding at least like half an hour on. And then by that time, we'd got to the run. I was just so happy to be off the bike, if I'm totally honest. Got into T2, and honestly, I must have done about 4. So when you take your bike into T2, obviously you rack your bike, and obviously I knew where my number was, but I remember looking with my bike, I was 634, that was my number. And I remember, seeing the number range where you put your bike, and I just couldn't find it. I couldn't find the 634 number. So I must have done like 4 or 5 laps of the thing, looking to where to put my bike, which added about an extra 2-3 minutes on, and it was making me get quite almost frustrated. But anyway, eventually found that, put my bike on, got changed, a little bit of a faster transition than T1, obviously because you don't have to take your wetsuit off or anything like that. But by this point, I was mostly fatigued. I'd finally started to warm up a little bit because I'd come off the bike and it wasn't raining by this point. But I was just so, I think, a lot more fatigued than I like to have been, purely because of what happened on the bike. Got into the run. First 10k, so first 6 mile was perfect. Again, I think I was just so happy to be off the bike that I was just feeling okay. And that was almost masking the pain. So I think I was doing about an 8:20 minute per mile for the first 10k 6 mile. Felt great, that's what I wanted to hold. And then I just hit an absolute massive wall. It hit about about the 7th mile. Just after it was around when I was coming onto my second loop, and it's 4 loops of the Bolton course of the park in the Bolton Town Centre, if you didn't know. So the start of the second loop hit a massive wall. And again, it was, when you get those thoughts going through your head thinking, you look down at your watch, you've done 7 miles, it feels like you've done about 70, and you've got nearly 20 miles still to go. And I'm just thinking, I'm in deep shit. I don't know how I'm going to be able to finish this. But anyway, started to be a bit more tactical, walked every single aid station, and even there was a long strip of road up Chorley New Road, which had no aid stations. It was probably like a mile and a half up there, mile and a half back. Then there was another aid station. Going to the park, there was another aid station. Running to Bolton Town Centre, another aid station, and then you do the loop again. But that long strip up the road where you go up, turn around, come back, it felt like it just went on forever. And I had to be really tactical on my second and third loop just to up down. Well, that's slight exaggeration. I wasn't that bad, but I was really in quite a dark place. It was one of those where you hear people where, you hit a wall and you've got to really dig deep. And in training, because I've been quite tactical how I went about things, I always fueled well, I never really hit a really bad wall. I felt really tired where I wanted to stop in training, but never to the point like I did on the day. And it's just one of those where it's like every part of you, your body and your mind, as you said, just stop. I was almost thinking of ways to justify stopping, and what I could say to my family, my friends, and my clients who were tracking me on the app, of what I could say to justify stopping. Like, and I had a load of little things, like minor injuries popping up, which I could say, but I think just the thought of making sure that you get to the next almost aid station and then see how you feel and then go from there. But having those aid stations and making sure I could just stop, even if I was running really slow anyway, but just having those aid stations where I could have some water, have some crisps, which really helped. Having something salty after having, sweet stuff all day and almost feeling sick because of it all really did help. So got through the second loop. And obviously that's where my, girlfriend was, and my dad actually came as well. And just having that really does help. That was absolutely massive. My girlfriend and my missus as well were absolutely great. I probably couldn't have got through without them, to be honest, because I was really having to dig deeper than I ever had in training. But long story short, managed to get through the run
in, I think it was like 4.5 hours on the run. I wanted to do sub 4 before it, and it's one of those at the minute where, you know, obviously I did have a slower bike and a slower run than I previously wanted to, but with it being my first Ironman and first ever triathlon, I'm just happy to finish, because I had to really dig deep on throughout that bike and run, if I'm totally honest. I didn't enjoy large parts of it purely just because of how much I was suffering, but overall got it done. I think I finished in something like 14 hours. Again, I wanted to finish in about 13 or sub 13, but it doesn't matter. I got it done, and that is pretty much everything.
So that was the race review. As you can see, it was absolutely brutal. I couldn't have imagined it being this tough. The weather was absolutely horrific. I remember some of our training rides before, we thought, how do you think we'll cope if it's really bad weather? And we thought, we'll be all right, we're fit enough. But I cannot get across to you how difficult it is doing something like this, where it's mentally draining. It pushes you to your absolute limit. And as I said, the main reason I wanted to do this was to give myself a goal, was to give myself something to strive towards, to work towards something. There's always going to be something on a big event like this which knocks you off guard, and you've got to get through it. And don't get me wrong, I had multiple points in the cycle and the run where I thought, I can't do this. I need to just back out and I'll try again next year. But there's always that thing in the back of your mind where there's that, let's just go for a few more minutes. Let's just get to the next checkpoint. Let's just see how you feel in the next 5-10 minutes. And then you can back out if you want to. That's what I used for myself. It was creating small little milestones, getting to that next little milestone, and knowing that if I got to that one, I can make it to the next one. And then by the end of it, you've got to the end and you've completed the full distance Ironman. Still to this day, 3 years later after completing it, as of recording this, it's July 2024, so it's just over 3 years. It's still the hardest thing I've ever done. And until I do another full distance Ironman, it probably will be the hardest thing I've ever done. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I know it's been a long one. If you're someone who wants to strive for something, a full distance Ironman is definitely something which it should be on your priority list if you're into your fitness and you want a really hard goal. I did mention in that post-race review, if you watched all the way to the end, or if you've watched the original video, I said I would like to do a half-distance Ironman triathlon within the next year or two. I haven't done one, so 3 years later, I haven't done any type of Ironman or any type of triathlon. All I did was 2022, I did a full-distance run marathon. But I don't plan on doing one anytime soon. I'm liking going back to my gym training. I'm liking training more for strength and training more for building muscle with cardio implemented into that, in regards to a few runs and a few cycles 2 to 3 times per week. But with all that being said, if you're a business owner who wants to transform their body, health and performance and get in the best shape of their life without the time constraints, head to the link in the description and you can inquire to work with me. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.